Yeah.
The Constitutional Court is the guardian of South Africa's democracy. It's the highest court in the Constitution, which came into effect 22 years ago when we became a democracy. So the rights and procedures and the aspirations and the values in the Constitution are what the Constitutional Court was set up to guard. The location of the court was very, very carefully chosen by the court's first judges, the ones that President Mandela appointed. The court could have gone to Pretoria or Midrand or Sandton or Johannesburg Central, but they chose Constitution Hill because of its historical importance, because of its accessibility between the suburbs and the townships and the inner city of Johannesburg, and also because of its history. This hill has a very painful history for political prisoners, and more even in pure numbers for ordinary South Africans, because hundreds of thousands of black South Africans were detained on the site where we're sitting now for past law offences. So the court is rooted in South Africa's history. The bricks from the jail which held people for past law offences were used in building the courtroom. So when we sit in court, determining the meaning of the Constitution and its promises and its aspirations, we sit surrounded by the bricks from those jails. We realize that the Constitution isn't unmoored from our past of injustice. We realize that our task is to undo that past of injustice and to create the future that the Constitution promises. Well, it's a great privilege to serve. I've been a judge for 22 years, and for 8 of those years I've been in this Constitutional Court. It's a fascinating court. It gets difficult, very complex cases. It's a court that itself is complex because it's an 11-member court, which involves considerable more collegial and decision-making complexity than a smaller court involves. But we are assisted by very brilliant and eager and visionary and optimistic young South Africans, our law clerks. So it's wonderful working here. In my 8 years here, we've had many momentous decisions on constitutional structure. The Glenister decision that decided on the independence of an anti-corruption unit is one decision. Many, many other decisions determining people's rights to housing, to water, to voting. The daily bread of this court is the fundamental rights of South Africans and the sort of society that we as South Africans want to see ourselves living in. Well, all the fundamental rights in our Bill of Rights are very close to my heart, especially equality, especially human dignity, and especially freedom of expression. And our court has been a very vigilant guardian of all of those rights, including the right of freedom of expression, both for the media but also for ordinary people, because without freedom of expression you cannot have a democracy, because democracy requires open expression, free information, access to the sources of power. And like my colleagues, my other 10 colleagues here, I've played my part in asserting those rights. I'm a South African living with HIV. I have the grace in my life of living for nearly 19 years on antiretroviral treatment, which became available to ordinary South Africans only in the last 10 or 12 years. So my life today is a testament to the fact that HIV can be beaten and that antiretroviral treatment does work. The stigma surrounding HIV is still enormous. Much of it is internalized stigma. We take the external stigmas, the irrationalities, the hatreds, the prejudices, the ignorances, the ostracisms from the outside world, and we bring them into our own consciousness inside. We interiorize stigma and shame. And that's a big impediment that we're still fighting in South Africa. I am still the only person holding high office in our country, and indeed elsewhere in Africa, to state publicly that I'm living with HIV. It would be helpful if we had more people, but each person has to take that decision personally. I think stigma has diminished. The most important part in the diminution of stigma is the fact that treatment is now available. This is not a life sentence. It is not a death sentence. This is not something that contaminates or pollutes or shames you. This is simply a wholly manageable, medically manageable viral particle. And that's the lesson that this court has also sent. This court has given two very important judgments on HIV. I wasn't party to either of them because they were given before I became part of the court. In the Hoffman case, this court laid down very emphatically that there will not be discrimination on the grounds of HIV, not against job applicants, not against the poor, not against the rich, not against men, not against women, because HIV is not a condition on which any rational person would discriminate. And then, more importantly even, in the Treatment Action Campaign case, this court ordered President Mbeki's government to start making antiretroviral treatment available. And now, our country has the world's largest publicly provided antiretroviral treatment program. A proud achievement of activists under the Constitution, a proud achievement of the rule of law under the Constitution, and a proud achievement of the principal judges who sat in that case.